Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So, good afternoon, and thank you so much to Bhai Bishwara Singh Ji and to Charles Townsend for organising such a great event. It's been really, really efficient, and it's been like clockwork, and amazing food and accommodation. A little bit scary about the accommodation, because this morning I heard a knock and I thought, oh my God, I'm in The Shining and the door's going to be broken and I'm going to see Jack Nicholson. And then I realised, no, I'm not in the film, I'm going to go to a conference. So my presentation today is Reforming Sikhi and Redevising the Panth, the influence of the Singh Sabha movement on the Sikh Jathebandiyan in the United Kingdom. And for those of you who don't know Gurmukhi very well, Jathebandiyan just means a Jatha, a group of people, and various groups of people, or you could say Sikh sects, but I don't really like that word, sect. So if you ever happen to visit the United Kingdom, and Professor Mann, I have to say that there are some things that people in the US say they need to learn. It's not gas. A gas is not a liquid, it's petrol. Right? And the other thing is, baseball is just a really bad version of cricket. And American football is just a ridiculous version of rugby. And McDonald's, I mean, they've ruined fish and chips, haven't they, forever? Yeah? I just had to say that. Yeah? That's my little comeback. So, this new generation, or we can say Naujawan, as we say in Punjab. So the Naujawan, and in the Buddha tradition, a Naujawan is somebody under 40. So that would be the Tarna Dal, and everyone over 40 would have been Buddha Dal, but that no longer happens anymore. It's all mixed up. So the Naujawan, they're kind of leading the way in the UK. Sadly, the older members, they don't want to give up their kursiyan so easy, but hopefully that will change one day as well. I think that's half of the problem, yeah, that the older generation, they don't want to give up the power. They want to dictate to the younger people in various different ways, and sometimes that doesn't help. Sometimes it does help, but mostly it doesn't really help. And what I wanted to see in my paper is, what was the influence of the Singh Sabha movement on these various groups in the UK at the moment? And it sounds like an easy question, but I've had a headache for the last couple of weeks, I can tell you that. It hasn't been an easy task to do that. And one of the reasons is there's so many different groups, and there's so many varied practices, and then how do you kind of isolate or make an example out of one practice, or use it as an example, or some kind of ritual to prove your point? Because I didn't want to come from I wanted some standpoint that was rational, that I could prove it easily and prove a transmission of some kind of practice. And so it was blatantly obvious what I was trying to demonstrate. So that was quite difficult to try and find an example. So the Naujawan in the UK, they're on a sort of soul-searching mission, and the ones that get into Sikhi, they're really looking for some kind of authenticity. They're looking for some kind of tradition. And they're scouring so much literature, you'll be really shocked that on websites like SikhSangat.com, Sikh Awareness, on the Punjab Digital Library, even so many people are accessing that and referencing that. So it's actually quite sophisticated. It isn't some kind of meager level of understanding. They're going through Suraj Prakash, as Satnam Singh was talking about, and other Pothiyan, and looking at Guru Granth Sahib Maharaj in a lot of great detail. And obviously in this type of situation, myself being an Ahang Singh, and I'd have a bias, so I've tried to check my bias, and that was one of the reasons I used my method that I will present. So the first Gurdwara in the UK was in Shepherd's Bush, and I believe that Sangha Sahib mentioned that earlier on. It was inaugurated around 1908, even though there's some kind of ambiguity about that. And it was under the Chief Khalsa Diwan. So those of you who know your history, that was the kind of umbrella organisation of the Singh Sabha when they all decided to get together instead of fighting one another.
Can you identify any of the people here that we should know?
No, but the lady with the fur coat,
Yeah.
you know what, that's just great style. You know, she stands out. I don't know who she is.
The guy at the back, Udham Singh. Right in the back.
Okay.
The little...
Brilliant. So we've got Udham Singh right at the back there, which is, you know, that's really important. So this is the London Sangat of 1938. So even quite early on, there was like, you know, quite a few Sikhs there, and obviously, as Sangha Sahib said, after World War II, there were even more Sikhs and coming from different parts of the world. And my question is, what did they do? What type of Sikhi did they practice, and why? Because it's, you know, Sikhi is not something that just comes to you. There's a transmission of knowledge between people and from literature, etc. And a question I ask here is, if this first Gurdwara at Shepherd's Bush was a Nirmala ashram, what would the Sikhi be like in the UK? It's just a question. It's quite an important question. Or if it was a Nahang Dera and they were making Shahidi Deg and Chatkaying a Bakra every few days or whatever, what would it be? What would the influence have been? Because a lot of the things we've been talking about, sometimes the first organisation that does something, it has a lot of impact and it has a big ripple effect and carries on for a long time. So what was the Singh Sabha? And this is the kind of backdrop to the Singh Sabha was, you know, the annexation of the Punjab, the loss of a kingdom, Maharaja and Dalip Singh converting to Christianity, allegedly, and so on and so forth. And I want to give a parallel example that just came to me this morning. So imagine tomorrow the Punjabis invading the UK from France, the Scottish and the Welsh betraying the Queen, and a prince crowned by the royals betrays them. The Queen then converts to Sikhism, and the Gurdwara is disguised as a clock tower and is built outside St Paul's Cathedral. That would be the parallel example. And like, people have not understood the ramifications of colonialism. They just haven't understood it. I think in Sikh studies, there's only a few people who've really looked at it. I think Mandir's work is really interesting, and I love the work of Richard King, even though it had nothing to do with Sikhi, but we can apply its theory towards Sikhi. And I just wonder, why hasn't that happened? Such a big event happened in the Punjab. Such a massive, the ripples are even being felt today, and it's just not looked at. Why isn't it looked at? It's so important. So that's another question that I have. So there's the increasing threat of conversions to Christianity, the perceived threat of Muslim and Hindu conversions, and misinformation. So, you know, everyone against each other, kind of communal kind of problems. I don't know. The reason I've used the word perceived, I don't know if they're real or not. So I'm not going to judge and say they were real or not real. I haven't looked into that. So this movement to try and salvage something of Sikhi, it was put together by Game Singh Bedi, a descendant of Guru Nanak, Thakar Singh, Bikram Singh, and the famous historian Gyan Singh Nirmala. You're shaking your head, is that wrong?
This Gyan Singh is a different Gyan Singh.
Okay, it's a different Gyan Singh.
No, it's not.
Okay, so it's a different Gyan Singh, it's not the Gyan Singh famous historian. Thanks for correcting that, because I was wondering myself. So the Singh Sabha was created like an umbrella body. But you've got to ask yourself the question, why was it created as an umbrella body? Because all of the Sikh institutions of polity and who had any kind of say over Panthic matters had dissolved. They were just non-existent in the Punjab. And people talk about 1984, but how many people know about the British attack on the Akal Takht Sahib? Has anybody ever come across that? Just look into that. You'll find it in Majbi Ityas. You won't find it in mainstream Ityas, because the Sikhs who died in that attack were Mazbi Sikhs, and hence why the mainstreams have just pushed it aside. Just like, what's this book called? By Jetaji, I've forgotten the title.
Das Kolkata.
No, not Das Gurkatha. Guru, what Das? No, it's a similar title, isn't it? Similar title. So, okay, there's a parallelism today because Sikhs are also in England, they're perceiving a threat of conversion by Muslims and grooming. And again, I'm saying perceiving. I don't know the extent of it. I have not looked into it. I don't know if it's happening in every town or every place. I have no idea. So there's a perceived threat of conversion to Islam. And also, the activism is motivated because people do not have faith in Sikh institutions either. So there's a lack of regard for the SGPC, the Akali Dal, Badal and others. So the youth are feeling disenfranchised, but that gives them a motivation once they become positive to do something. So I'd say a lot of activism is also born out of that, especially when it comes to human rights in Punjab and other such issues. So then later on, the Singh Sabha, it split. And one of the main reasons was about whether Maharaja Dalip Singh should be reinstated. Gurmukh Singh, he made originally he was under the Amritsar Singh Sabha, created a Singh Sabha in Lahore, but then he split off. And one of the reasons was he was a British loyalist. And there's some interesting things that come later on in my paper. And he perceived that there were Brahmanic practices that had infiltrated Sikhism. So this is quite interesting. He wasn't that vocal about this. It was Teja Singh Pasoria who picked up his ideology and he kind of polarized it even further and made it even more radical. So then the Singh Sabha developed into three main groups, Amritsar, Lahore and Basor, which is in Patiala. And Teja Singh was quite mental. He declared the Khalsa Parliament in his own village. I mean, this guy was not sane. And when you read about him, you realise there was something wrong there. Because you just don't say to the whole Panth, there's a Takht in my village. That's like me coming here and saying, oh, you know, the Takht's in Northampton. It's not something you do, and it's one of the things that he called for. So, Guru Darshan Singh in his chapter in 1988, he says that the Singh Sabha were influenced. So this is the dominant group that took over from the original movement started by Game Singh Bedi and were loyal to the British. They were motivated by their sincere admiration of the British people, their institution and their system of government. So that's quite interesting. They advocated constitutions, holding elections and voting. That's something in England we have a major problem with, and a lot of fights and legal cases and a lot of money spent over that. And they also advocated breaking with the old orthodoxy and to borrow new ideas from the West. So the Lahore Singh Sabha, even by Gurmukh Singh, he set it up. It was headed by Atar Singh. And Atar Singh is very, very interesting because when you look through his correspondence letters with the British, he writes these three things. And I have a copy of the original letter. It's in the private collection of Peter Bance in London. So number one, that Sikhs have no sympathy for Maharaja Dalip Singh. He wanted to make this kind of movement that would happen. Number two, that the welfare of the Sikhs depends on the welfare of the British government. And that was instructed by our gurus. You'll find something very similar in Macauliffe's preface. That the Sikhs have no confidence in the book of Sakhis, that's the Source Sakhi, which brought misery and misfortune to the Sikh state. The Namdaris used the Source Sakhi as a text to motivate people to rebel against the British. So this is quelling of rebellion. This is the Singh Sabha that took over. This is what they were about. They were loyalists. They were not trying to do the Panth a favour. That's what I argue. So Teja Singh later on, this is his list of reforms that this is not definitive. I just had a look through the book, and the ones that I could pick up, I picked up because some of them are quite cryptic. So changing in the Mangalacharans in the Guru Granth Sahib, removing the Bhagat Bani because it's Hindu, Patna Deswaye because it's Hindu, remove the Rag Malla from the Guru Granth Sahib to complete in Bandavani, to edit Dasam Granth to 75 pages, as other portions were by Hindu court posts as it is Mukhwak Darbari. That's in his book Khalsa Red Prakashik from 1919. Modification of the Sikh Ardas from Pritham Bhagoti to Pritham Satanam. You have Professor Darshan Singh doing that Pritham Satanam as well, I believe, in Finland and other places. Removing the Hikaitan from the Zafarnama, because the Zafarnama is historically verifiable, so he couldn't deny it, so he had to compromise with something else. But the Hikaitan, when you look at Sikh history, you'll find that they were sent to Aurangzeb in the Battle of Bangani. Removing the final verses Jogbe Sahib, which we mentioned earlier on, with Nikki in a question, you find only the modern version is excised, and calling for the creation of the fifth Takht in his village, and that if you look at the biography of Sahib Singh, he talks about Basoria combining Ard Granth and Dasam Granth and wanting to bury it at Hajur Sahib to create a new Guru Granth Sahib. So this guy was a lunatic, but a lot of what he wanted has ended up in the Panth. Now I'm going to go through very, very quickly. So one of the issues that they had is with Aarti. The Sikh Aarti, Gagan Mein Thal Rav Chand Bane, Deepak Bane. And it's about, in the Hindu temples, they do the Aarti with the Dive. But look, it's also very interesting, they do it with the Jor Sahib. And the original Bani, it mentions the Jor Sahib in there. But the Dive have been banned, but the Jor has been allowed. Now Hajur Sahib, they have Dive and the Jor Sahib. So the Jor, the fly whisk. So here's a Hajur Sahib where they still have the lanterns intact. This is in England now, so this is now this have finally got into what I wanted to speak about. So now you find an original kind of traditional praxis that has been modified by the Singh Sabha, and it was modified by Gyani Dit Singh. He wrote Aarti Barbod and he wanted it banned. And it's a very interesting book, everyone should have a read of that. And this is how they do Aarti at Harmandir Sahib. So you find this at Baba Sang, Nanak Sahib Gurdwara. You find it in BC and in Toronto. Now we've got a picture of the Guru Nanak Nishkam Seva Jatha. That's them doing Aarti, sitting down. So even though they're a Sant movement, there's an influence of the Singh Sabha. So I find this very interesting, there's amalgamations and consolidations of various different kinds going on. Nanak Sahib also, they will not do the Aarti standing up because they're a Punjab-based movement that occurred after the period of reform or around the same time. The Taksal, interestingly, they do the Aarti standing up, but a lot of the times they'll do they'll sitting down and singing it. So here at the Bosk Sikhi camp, you've got Aarti, and you can see the flowers being thrown over Sri Guru Granth Sahib. And the Bosk camp is predominantly Taksali. And again, the Nahang Singhs, even though they haven't got a Gurdwara, they'll do the Aarti standing up. This is the point of my paper, to show an original Maryada and the change of it, and then how it's come back. Khand Kirtan Jatha, no go, they don't believe in Aarti at all. So this is the chart that I drew up after, about the influences and the diaspora, about where each strain of thought comes. And the Nanak Iskam Jatha are very interesting because they're linked with the Khand Kirtan Jatha by Gyani and Molan Singh. So they have some influences of the Khand Kirtan even though they're a Sant movement. So my conclusion is pretty simple. The Singh Sabha did succeed in creating a neutral place where different bodies could come together, but they failed to a certain extent because by editing liturgy, they marginalised the tradition. So they marginalised many Sikhs who were part of a different tradition, and they wanted to keep their traditions intact, so they had to make other Gurdwara. The same ideas are still prevalent in the youth and in this millennial generation who are still arguing over the same points, as Jasbir Singh pointed out in his presentation, the long list. So traditional Sikh rituals like Aarti are having a resurgence, and the committee system is a point of conflict which has turned many who are younger away from the Gurdwara system. And one of the other points I looked at in my paper slightly was about camps. And if you look at the two camps, one is the Akhand Kirtan Jatha camp, Khalsa camp, and they are very, very Singh Sabha-fied. Then you have the Taksali Boss camp, and they're very, very traditional. But one thing which holds them together is their nationalistic views. And I found that very, very interesting, that they were very, very chummy, but they're completely different, but it's because of their political motivations. So you'll find a lot of amalgamations of different types, and interestingly, people are consolidating their own identity, like by wearing something a Nahang will wear, something a Taksali will wear, doing some kind of Nanak style practice to be more sort of user-friendly with everyone. Thank you very much.